We have special guest with us today. Michael Malice is here. He's a Ukrainian-American author and host of You're Welcome with Michael Malice podcast. His books, plural, include Dear Reader, the unauthorized autobiography of Kim Jong-il, and The New Right, A Journey to the Fringe of American Politics. He is also the subject of a graphic novel, Ego and Hubris, written by the late Harvey Pekar of American Splendor fame. Wow. Please welcome Michael Malice. Hi, Michael. How are you?
Jimmy, it's great to be here. You were just on my show, so I'm honored to be able to return the favor or the punishment, whichever it might be.
Well, here is the book. It's called The White Pill. That's his latest book. Now, you also wrote the handbook for anarchists and stuff. So introduce yourself to our audience. Tell people what you're about and what people should know about you.
I am probably best known as being a total jerk on Twitter, but I'm also an author, as you said. I am an anarchist. I am just a big fan of anyone like yourself who is red-pilled and recognizes that the corporate press is the enemy of the people.
So what do you mean by red-pilled? And then tell me what you mean by an anarchist.
Sure. Anarchism is simply the premise. I'll do it in reverse order because that's what I'm showing anarchist I am. Anarchism is simply the premise that you do not speak for me and everything else is application. As for red pilling is the belief that that which is presented as fact by the corporate press is in reality a carefully constructed narrative designed to keep some very unpleasant people in power.
Boy, it is amazing. Once you see that.
Dayquil?
It is amazing once you see it, right? Once you get red-pilled, it's like it's unbelievable. It's all narrative control, because if they don't do it 24/7, meaning the oligarchy, the people who run the government and the people who actually run the media, they're the same people. If they don't do that, if they don't narrative enforce and narrative control 24/7, they're going to have to start disappearing people and locking you up, and that's harder to do. That takes more effort.
Yes,
and so that's why we, and people have no idea what's really going on in the world. So keep going. Tell people more about yourself.
I'll just give you a good example that will be exactly speak to your audience. And I had a tweet thread about this, and I'll retweet in a second. We all remember 2015 when your candidate Tulsi Gabbard smoked that pig like only a Hawaiian can, Kamala Harris, in the debates. After Kamala Harris dropped out of the presidential campaign, there were a series of articles that were post-mortems about why her campaign failed. None of them even mentioned that Tulsi humiliated her in the presidential debates. Now, if one person does it, maybe they're incompetent. But when you have a series of articles from major prominent publications, that is clearly intentional, and that is clearly them trying to present and create a narrative. And it's impossible to look at the history of the Kamala Harris campaign and not regard the presidential debates where she got nuked as instrumental to her defeat.
Wait, but what about when she wore Timberlands and I felt so seen?
Or when she loved her tour bus. Oh my God, I love it.
I'm an old K-hiver.
So, and let's remember again, it was if you're red-pilled, you see why they hated Tulsi. Yes. People forget what people hated about Tulsi. The reason they hated Tulsi were two reasons: because she endorsed Bernie Sanders, and she stepped down as the vice chair of the Democratic National Committee to endorse Bernie Sanders. That made them hate her. And then she told the truth about war, about Syria. And they called her a Russian for doing that. They do the same thing to me. They called her a conspiracy theorist. They call her, she's an officer in the army fighting those stupid wars that she's speaking against, and she's not allowed to have an opinion.
Well, as a Russian, let me make a little caveat. It's not simply that she endorsed Bernie. It's that she called them out on their tactics to stack the deck against Bernie, and to even acknowledge that there's politics within a political party. I mean, the idea of politics in a political party, that was, I think, a heresy. That was a bridge too far for them.
And Bernie couldn't even stand up for her. She had his back, and he is such a coward. Honest to God, He is such a nothing. He is such a nothing.
Can you imagine if he wasn't a coward? Donnie Deutsch might have had to vote Trump.
But that's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's a good point, Kurt.
So now, Michael, so you would call yourself an anarchist?
Yeah.
I still don't know really what that is.
So anarchism is the political philosophy or ideology that is based on the view that political authority is inherently illegitimate, right? So killing someone isn't wrong simply because it's illegal, and something is not moral simply because it is mandated. So when you have that as your basis of approaching, our political system, lots of things that we are taught to the contrary since we're children fall away, pretty quickly. And there's a recognition that the people in power, like Pelosi and Mitch McConnell, it's not Republican versus Democrats. They are literally gangsters with two rival gangs, and they have their turf warfare. And, people in this country have this idea that gangsters are like lower class, and they've got tattoos and they got all these rings, but it's much more like the Godfather. And yeah, just because they dress nice doesn't mean that they're not thugs who are on the take. And you were on my show and you made this point yourself. You're like, it's not that it's not like America is just like regular corrupt, right? If the politicians were like, you know what, I'm going to hire my brother to do this job, or my wife's going to have this job, who cares? You know what I mean? It's the level of complete inherent corruption that's baked into the cake, which I think, and it's something from an anarchist perspective, is not resolvable. I think that is inherent to the nature of government. That is what speaks to my anarchism, the anarchism of others. If you look behind me on my shoulder, I had Emma Goldman. She was on the cover of my new book. She was probably the queen bee of anarchism, if anarchism had queens.
But how do you organize a society of anarchists?
Well, societies are organized peacefully. You organize them voluntarily. We're having an anarchist relationship right now, even though this is your show. You can run it however you want. And you wouldn't have the biggest threat, something that you and I completely agree on, is the interface between corporate America and the government, wherein every single regulation, for the most part, is written by people in giant corporations to ensure that there's no competition. So to have any kind of measure of competition is A, anathema to this entire system, and B, healthier to the masses.
And so do people call you a right-winger because of I'll just stop it there.
I'll give you, what's really funny is people in this country, and I'm sure you've seen this a lot with your audience and the way you speak, if someone likes you, you're on their team, right? And the second someone doesn't like you, therefore you're really on the other team, right? So if you're going after progressives, conservatives will call you conservative, and then as soon as you don't like a conservative, oh, I thought we were on the same team, right? Say, you're this. Oh, I always knew. You know what I mean? So that's exactly how people perceive politics. I'm comfortable with any label that people want to ascribe to me.
So people do that. That people do that too. They try to discredit me by saying, oh, Jimmy, half his audience is right wingers. And I'm like, that's not an insult. That's a compliment that my message has brought appeal.
That's pretty nuanced.
That's not an insult.
That's a pretty nuanced, because I have people like, oh, isn't he right wing? I'm like, no. People just been like, oh, he's right wing. Thinking you have right wing listeners.
Because I don't vote for fucking Democrats. So Democrats want to smear me and discredit me, and then idiots in comedy
There's only
who know
two
nothing.
brands, Jimmy. You pick one.
That's it.
Now you can.
You know what's interesting?
Yeah.
The question for them isn't, are you correct or incorrect in general or a given issue?
It's like, what team is he on?
They want to have this binary filter to be like, all I need to know is he on my team or on that team? And as soon as someone is a progressive or a right winger, I don't need to hear another word that they have to say, because now I know that they're wrong. And as if the idea that someone is like on the wrong team and they can't be an oncologist, right? It's like, oh, you're a Hillary voter. I can't trust anything you have to say about my cancer. You don't know how many genders there are. But that is really their thinking.
I've seen that thinking actually in memes on Twitter where people said, would you go to this doctor? And it was a guy who had a Trump hat on or something. And you're like, really? You ask people how they vote before you go to the doctor?
I have a question. Is he going to wear it while he's treating me?
Right. Right?
That just seems weird.
So the guy who's...
Or what if his brother works in the Trump campaign? Right? Or Trump gave him a real estate deal. Who the hell knows why he's a Trump supporter? Or maybe he just wants to piss off people.
So, Michael, that was the big awakening for me when Trump won. And I knew that the people who voted for Bernie Sanders and voted for Obama twice, who voted for Trump, they weren't racists. These were people who were desperate, and they were willing to take a chance on a game show host because the system had utterly failed them. They had voted for a black guy with a Muslim name twice, and their lives got worse. 31 counties in Iowa that voted for Bernie Sanders, then voted for Trump. Is that because of racism? No, that's because they were desperate for someone with a message that wasn't from a corporation. And go ahead.
One of the points I made in my book, then you're right, and I think people increasingly understand, Hillary Clinton will always have more in common with Mitch McConnell than she will with a union member who voted blue his entire life, which she did not as a former Goldwater girl. And when you put it like that, it's indisputable.
That is such a good point.
Am I wrong though?
No, I'm going to, as soon as you said it, I knew I'm going to immediately start saying that for the rest of my life. And
with my compliments.
And I will not credit you, but,
Anarchy.
And then it'll become like my thing, like they pretended it was Bernie's thing when he said our foreign policy is our domestic policy. No, that's Tulsi's thing. You guys just hijacked that. Totally. Hey, do you ever, Michael, just to kind of still get a feel for you politically, do you ever vote?
No, the last chapter of the Anarchist Handbook, which is a collection of historical essays by prominent anarchists, and then I'm the last chapter bringing up the rear, last and definitely least, is my essay on why I don't vote, and I don't believe in voting.
And why don't you vote, and why don't you believe in voting?
Because I don't think anyone has the capacity or right to represent me. And it's nonsensical that someone will speak for me in terms of abortion and tax policy and foreign policy and education and healthcare. I mean, imagine if you sat down, went to an office, and you have to pick someone who's going to be your lawyer and your accountant and your chef and your chauffeur. It would be crazy. But yet when it comes to politics, we're forced to. And the other thing about that, which is crazy, is, I have this line in my book on North Korea that having one person in charge, one choice is dictatorial, but having two choices is freedom. We are subjected to a year-long process by which the choices for which people have to choose for their presidential candidate are winnowed down until you have two options. There's no other system, television, food, books, anything, lawyers, doctors, accountants, where you are forced to have two and only two choices, neither of which ever are, to my memory in our lifetime, are good people.
So what do you say? There's a famous saying, I'm going to butcher it, but the gist of it is, if you're not willing to get informed and participate in politics, that the price you pay for that is that you're ruled by your lessers.
Well, that's the price we're paying regardless, number one. And second, I don't think that once every 4 years flicking a switch in secret is somehow more of an accomplishment than writing books and talking about politics constantly, that I'm somehow not part of the process.
No, I'm not saying you're not part of the process. I'm just trying to talk about the idea of not voting. So,
but just one more thing. I don't begrudge anyone else. If they want to go vote, knock yourself out. Don't look down on them or anything like that. I'm just saying, for me, this is something that I do not think is a good use of time. And I don't, if I vote, because if I voted for the guy, I'm endorsing him.
Okay.
George Carlin didn't vote.
George Carlin, I'm pretty sure, did not vote.
We were supposed to not vote at my church.
Really?
Yeah, Jehovah's Witnesses can't join the military or vote. And the reason is they're not part of this whole thing. And then you can't have somebody comes in power. Maybe they'll say, hey, you voted for the other guy. And then they persecute your religion. So they have to stay neutral, like Switzerland, basically.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So what do you see a way forward? So like, what are you and I agree on war, correct?
Yes, very much so.
And what's your stance?
there's a wonderful person, and can I give me a minute to talk about him, because one of the things that I love being positioned to do is people who are forgotten history, kind of keeping their memory alive. There was someone named Randolph Bourne, and Randolph Bourne was an early progressive writer in the 1910s, and he was deformed. He was like a dwarf, and he had like one ear lower than the other if you look at photos of him. And first of all, he was one of the first people to speak about what life in like is America as a handicapped person, right? Because he was going to meet with some mentor, possibly by a writing position. The guy took one look at him and was like, kind of dismissed him. And Bourne had this essay about what it's like being handicapped in the States, and being like, look, just because I'm physically disabled doesn't mean I can contribute. And before that time, the Victorian era, if someone was disabled in some way, you kind of shunt them up in the attic and threw them away. And he was one of the main figures who kind of was like, whoa, I'm a human being. But he died in the Spanish flu during World War I, and he was a very big opponent of getting Americans involved in the so-called Great War. He was one of the only progressives who spoke out against the draft and what Wilson was doing. And it was, of course, overnight, John Dewey and all that crew were like, oh, well, he's handicapped in body, he's handicapped in mind. So they turned in a dime. Did that with Helen Keller, too. I don't know if you know this. No. Helen Keller was a radical communist, right?
Yeah.
And as soon as she started talking about communism, everyone's like, oh, well, she's mentally handicapped. She's like, I'm not dumb. I just can't talk.
Didn't they blame the chick who's the one that taught her? They try to blame her as the influence, but if anything, she kind of toned it back, I thought.
And no, we have footage of Helen Keller talking, and I'm liking her last name. Anyway, Bourne, when he died, they found an essay in his trash, and one of the lines from that essay is, war is the health of the state. So war is government at its worst, and war is what allows governments to do the absolute most depraved things. Only in a time of war, if you look at 9/11, which was very much a prelude to the Afghanistan-Iraq conflict, are governments in a position to do whatever they damn well please with the support of the population.
Michael Malice, sorry, we were having a little technical problem. Michael, I forgot what you were saying. Do you remember what you were saying?
I was talking about Randolph Bourne, and when he died, there was an essay in his trash where he had the line, war is the health of the state. And his point being, when governments are at war, the citizenry allows them to do things that would be unimaginable in peacetime. We saw this with the Patriot Act in the prelude to the Afghanistan-Iraq war, keeping us safe from terrorists for 20 years now.
Well, now, Michael,
Woodrow Wilson.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Woodrow Wilson, the things that he was allowed to do during the Great War and things like that are just things that are unimaginable today.
You're not happy we brought those jobs back to America, Michael?
So, how do you? So, what's your prescription for change then in America? How do we end the wars?
I think the biggest. Well, we're starting to see it already. Yeah, if they had their druthers, we would have been in Syria. I'm sure everyone listening to this remembers.
Michael, I don't know how to break this to you. We're in Syria. We're occupying a third of Syria.
But you know
what
I mean. We were told that if we don't get boots on the ground, there was going to be another genocide. It's going to be another Holocaust. And we didn't get boots on the ground, and that didn't end up happening. And every single person who was on television making this claim and invoking genocide had no consequences for it. But they still didn't get what they want. So one of the biggest mechanisms to fighting war is an increasing understanding, which is happening, in my opinion, at an exponential rate, of the collusion between governments and the corporate press, and the understanding that these actors, these people, have an agenda, and that agenda is often adversarial to the interests of the American people, and often adversarial to the interests of the people who we're supposedly fighting for as well.
Do you notice something interesting? Like all the bad communist countries, I heard this for years, they have perpetual revolution. So that means they got to crack down on your rights all the time. Well, and I can't believe how fast we have that here. We just say terrorism, I guess, instead of perpetual revolution. Same difference. They do whatever they want. We got face burkas. You can say less stuff than you can in an Arab country now. It's amazing to me how quick they brought that here and with no thought about it whatsoever.
So I'm going to get to the book, I promise, but I want... So again, tell me again, what is your idea of how to make change as an anarchist?
Well, I don't think my idea of how to make change is particularly informed by my anarchism, but I think the best mechanism in America to make change is to increase the perception and the reality of illegitimacy on behalf of both the state and the corporate press, which informs its actions.
Okay, now I agree with that. You are onto something, because what I've been preaching, or what I've been saying, is that we're worse off having people like AOC and Bernie Sanders and stuff in the Democratic Party inside Congress, because it gives people the bad idea and the misimpression that there's somebody fighting for you inside the system, and that the system could actually work for you at some point. And so I keep saying, well, when are people going to stop taking this? When are they going to stand up? Nobody they vote for is going to do anything for them. It's clear that nobody they vote for is going to do anything for them, especially after the Democrats had complete control of government. And their biggest thing they did was they implemented a lockdown, took our rights away, and then they broke a railroad strike. Those are the big, and then they gave $100 billion to a proxy war. So what you're saying is that, and what I'm saying, and you tell me if this is what you're saying, what I'm saying is, until people have given up on the system, we have to make sure people realize that this is a failed system and it is unfixable in the current state that it is in. And to keep people voting as if it's going to make a difference, to keep people voting in, just again, picking a team, a political team, and being tribal, like that's going to fix things. Bernie Sanders used to start off every speech by saying we need a revolution. Mm-mm. He doesn't say that anymore, because Bernie Sanders never meant it. He wanted to take your revolutionary energy and funnel it back into a pro-war, pro-Wall Street, anti-worker party, and that's exactly what he did. And you can't deny that that's his job in the Democratic Party anymore, after he did it so blatantly 2 times in a row and extracted nothing for his support. Everybody else gets something for their vote and support, not Bernie Sanders and not his movement. We just saw what Matt Gaetz and the right wing Thomas Massie, what they just got for their vote. The people with the least power in their caucus, they got all the power. And we see people in the Democrat, they'll never use it for you. Okay, but that you are correct. So we need to make, so I'm trying to get people to realize Democrats and Republicans are not your friends, and that they work for the same people. They have the same interests. Are there people inside the Democratic Party who might be less of a maniac than other people? Yes, that does. But the system ain't gonna ever let those people do anything for you. We're the richest country in the world, and half the country's poor. We're the richest. Go ahead, Michael. I'm talking too much.
Sorry. I'm going to buttress what you said with what Noam Chomsky said, who's another prominent anarchist. Noam Chomsky's point, and you made this point in other words when you were on my show, is the best way to control a population is to have vigorous political debate within strictly delineated terms, right? You were on my show. You're talking about, well, here's the range. Do we bomb the hell out of them, or do we bomb the shit out of them?
That's right.
Let's have that big fight. So yeah, this is exactly what happens in Washington. They yell at each other on TV, and then they laugh at you behind your back. You and I are both old enough to remember when WWF, when it was still called WWF, was completely exposed to be fake, because Hacksaw Jim Duggan and the Iron Sheik from Iran, he loves Iran. He came here to wrestle people. I mean, that's real Persian patriotism, right? And they were found like sharing like weed in a car together. They were arrested. And for those people who still thought wrestling was real, this was a shock. This guy's the patriot. This guy's the Iranian terrorist. They're smoking weed together. I've been lied to.
Is that why they came out?
Realize wrestling's fake. It's still athletic. It's still entertaining. But these guys don't hate each other, and some of them do maybe. But it's not the ones who are in a feud. The ones in a feud probably get along well together. Yeah. They work well together. So yeah, you see Lindsey Graham fist bumping Kamala Harris on the Senate floor. These people don't hate each other. There's so much animus, but then they go home and they just return to their districts and do what they want. Come on, please. And here's another good example. All those Republicans who fought Gay marriage is the worst thing ever. Gay marriage is the worst thing ever. They don't talk about it anymore. Why don't they talk about it anymore? If this is something that your religion tells you is so important, it's going to end all civilization, why have you shut up about it?
That's a good question. So there's going to be an anti-war rally February 19th in Washington, D.C. You going to go?
No, probably not. I try to avoid D.C. as much as possible.
Okay. Come on.
I could be persuaded. You're not entirely wrong.
So you're in Austin, right?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I didn't know. So I didn't know when we were there. I did my last special in Austin.
Oh.
If I'd have known, I would have given you a call. My favorite Mexican place is in Austin. Oh my God.
Please do drop me a line next time you're here. I would love to see you.
So in this book,
yeah.
Let me just read the back of the book. It's good. It says the Russian Revolution was as red as blood. The Bolsheviks promised that they were building a new society, a workers' paradise that would change the nature of mankind itself. What they ended up constructing was the largest prison that the world had ever seen, a union of Soviet socialist republics that spanned half the globe. It was a country where people's lives meant nothing, less than nothing, and they knew it. But no matter what atrocity that the Soviets committed, the secret police, the torture chambers, show trials, the labor camps, and the mass starvation, there was always someone in the West rushing to justify their bloodshed. For decades, it seemed perfectly obvious that the USSR wasn't going anywhere until it vanished from the face of the earth gradually and then suddenly. This is the story of that rise and fall of that evil empire and why it is so important for the good to never give up hope. This is the white pill. So that's what this book is all about. Now, you're Ukrainian. Are you part of the Donbass Russian-speaking Ukrainians, or are you something else?
I'm from Lvov, which is as far west as you can get. So the Galicia region, yeah.
So
I left there when I was 1.5, so I don't remember it at all. And we spoke Russian at home, not Ukrainian.
And so you wrote this book to talk about the atrocities that the communist regime committed in Russia, right? That's what this is pretty much all about.
No, that's not entirely what. But the most important part, the takeaway, is they lost. So when people nowadays look at the enemy and they think we can't win, these guys have been at it too long, they're too evil, they're too powerful, their fingers are in every pie, and it's like, hey guys. That we've seen the show and they lost relatively easily and almost entirely peacefully. So, one of the criticisms I get as an anarchist is like, oh, you're naive. You think human beings are basically good. I'm like, let me show you how evil humanity can be. Let me show you people being turned against their children and their children being forced to starve for political purposes and kids have to get up in school and denounce their parents in hopes of getting bread. Let me talk about people being tortured and people being starved, the entire Ukraine, simply to get grain for Stalin. So, yes, it's very, very dark what was done. But the point is, it wasn't permanent. They went away. And how they went away, I think, has many parallels to things that are happening in contemporary society.
Do you think a big part?
Go ahead.
You know, Gabor Mate, when we had him on, he was talking about in Hungary, they knew it was propaganda. That was like the big difference. Is like they all knew what they were hearing was propaganda.
But in America, we don't.
Do you think that's the difference that makes that tipping point? Is once. Because a bunch of people here that I talk to.
Because people still think what they see in the corporate news is real. They think, well, it's not from the government, and these guys would never lie. Anderson Cooper's, he's gay. He wouldn't lie. And so...
That really is the logic.
That is the logic.
Yeah.
You know that.
Yeah. That's why they'll lock you in a restaurant when the guy from Pfizer asked them to.
That's right. That is exactly right. That's right. So that is the difference. I think Gabor made that a great point. People, when they're in behind the red curtain, they knew the news was propaganda. In the United States, they don't know that. They think it's actually the news, which is why they don't revolt. Right.
But the other thing, Jimmy, is why I'm so hopeful is everyone now, because in the 30s when Stalin starved Ukraine, right? There's like only 2 or 3 photographs because the government could effectively censor movement and censor the flow of information. Now, literally everyone has a camera wherever they go. Mm-hmm. So when they try to pull their antics and they set up these shots where, like, remember Anderson Cooper was in waders and in water and it's just complete fake. All it takes is one person, and they could air it live. We saw this during COVID when you had the reporter having the mask, but the cameraman didn't. And as he's airing his footage, the people around them go, your cameraman's not wearing a mask. And he looked like a complete ass. But that, to me, here's the thing. As soon as it's like having an ex-wife or ex-husband, as soon as you recognize once these people are lying, not mistaken, people make mistakes all the time, but this is orchestrated and deceptive intentionally, you can't go back and you can't look at them the same way. You realize, wait a minute, these people, my line is the battle is won when the average American regards a corporate journalist exactly as he regards a tobacco executive. They got a job. They're selling poison. It's fine to sell poison in a free country. You want to sell cigarettes? Go ahead, sell your cigarettes. Point being, I'm not going to look at you as some heroic figure speaking truth to power. You are the power.
We just showed how even people like Jon Stewart are that now, and they're narrative controllers, and that's what if Chomsky taught us the 5 filters of propaganda, and the biggest one is ownership, and there's only 6 media companies in the whole goddamn country. So, and if you want to have a job in media, you're going to have to do what the oligarchs want and say what they want, and if you color outside,
I don't think that's entirely true any longer, because you and I have jobs in media. So,
okay.
You see what I'm saying?
But we are very managed in a sense that, so if I get to be a little bit of a threat, when I got to be a little bit of a threat to the Democratic Party, they immediately wrote smear articles about me because they control the media. They gave us a fake strike on YouTube, which was completely bogus because I was correct about COVID. They're wrong about COVID. So they have those. They can just deplatform me. Look what they did to Alex Jones. Look what they did to the president. Look what they're doing to. It started with Alex Jones, and then of course it goes to everybody. It goes to the leading doctors and scientists in their fields. It goes to writers, journalists, but it doesn't go to the journalists that are towing the line. It goes to the journal. Anybody who pushes back against the narrative is called a conspiracy theorist and then deplatformed. So. Right. So as soon as I'm not a big enough threat yet, Michael, and as soon as I do, they will deplatform me.
I understand what I'm saying, but what you're saying, but my point is what you're describing is still a massive step better than things had been, let's suppose, 40 or 50 years ago.
I don't know about that because right now I've been trending for the last 3 days negatively always, and that's because of Democratic Party operatives, right? So
yeah, but Jimmy, 40 years ago you'd be vanished. That's my point. You would only have 3 networks, and if you weren't towing the line in those 3 networks, people would not know you exist. Yeah, maybe they have to go to Rumble, and maybe that's a fraction of the audience of YouTube. That is still progress in the right direction, even though that's not where we need to be. Okay,
so so you're making the case. So I'm getting to that point where George Carlin was at the end of his life. I'm getting to that point. I'm not there yet, but I see how things run. And when you say that, hey, the bad guys lost, right? So you talk about the communist regime and how they lost because overnight the Berlin Wall fell and they didn't see that coming and it happened, boom, overnight. Didn't take years or months.
Can I interrupt something with you? Because there's an anecdote in my book, and if this was in a movie, you wouldn't believe it. Helmut Kohl, who was the head of West Germany, was in Poland talking to Václav Klaus, who was the head of Poland, and Klaus is like, all right. Sorry, I got the name.
Lech Walesa.
Excuse me. Lech Walesa.
Yeah.
And Walesa goes, I don't think the Berlin Wall is going to be around. It might be like a few months longer. And Helmut Kohl laughs in his face and goes, you're young. You don't understand how politics work. This is going to take many, many years. It fell the next day. And Helmut Kohl says, I'm at the wrong party, and gets on a plane out of Warsaw. So, yeah, they did not see it coming.
So I forget where I was. So you say that they beat those guys, right? So they lost, and that's that you have an optimist view, and things can get better. But I don't know, things are worse now in a lot of ways in Russia than they were before. Especially, in that transition period was horrible because the American crony capitalists came in.
Yes.
Tell people what happened.
Well, it was. Any transition period is going to be a nightmare. I mean, there's no argument there. But point being, the most important thing that Russians have now that they didn't have then is passports. They have the ability to communicate people from up. They have access to information. These are things that, like you were saying earlier, if you had ABC, NBC, and CBS, like when our parents were around, that was it. And the New York Times. Now imagine what the population of America would look like if you had ABC, CBS, and NBC and the New York Times give you the information news. How could you possibly be anti-war? It would not be a possibility because they would all give you different angles on why we need war and why being anti-war is crazy and un-American and blah, blah, blah. Now, yes, I agree with you. They have tools to suppress you and people like you, people like myself, Alex, all these other names. But the point being, compared to what it was in very recent memory, it is a far weaker position that they're in terms of being to suppress heretical voices than if they had their druthers.
So you know how everybody in Soviet Russia was scared, right?
Yes, of course. That's
so then
with good reason.
So that's a lot of energy. That's a lot of unnecessary energy that the state has to put out to make everybody scared. So what I think, this is my theory, is that the nefarious people who always run everything just figured out that we don't have to make everybody scared. We just have to be able to control the people who are going to agitate for revolution. And if we can control them, we got the whole game. And if we can control the narrative, we can control the rest of the people with just propaganda, which is exactly, we don't have to get them scared like that. So what they do is they get us scared to give up our rights. So now we live in a surveillance state where before in Soviet Russia, you were afraid someone was listening on the phone. Someone is listening in on the phone in the United States. Every phone call, every text, and every email is being collected by the NSA so they can use to blackmail you if they ever have to. Just like it was found out that Tucker Carlson was trying to set up an interview, and he didn't tell his staff. He was trying to set up an interview with Vladimir Putin. And all of a sudden, someone he knows who works at the NSA said, "Hey, what are you doing talking to these people in Russia?" And he's like, "How do you know I'm doing that?" And he said, "Well, we got your text and we got your phone calls, and they're going to use it to smear you." So we do. So you say, so let me just give this. So this is my pushback to you saying progress happens, the good guys can win, we got to keep fighting, is that they've just switched now. So they don't use all that unnecessary energy to make everybody scared. They've got us now to we're in a surveillance state. We did it voluntarily. We don't even have habeas corpus anymore. So in the United States, we're operating on a liberty view from around the 1100s because habeas corpus was in the goddamn Magna Carta. We're behind that now. Right. So that's my case. What do you say to it?
Well, I agree with you that if they had their druthers, we'd have a totalitarian state. So I think you're completely right that you can't put anything past these people whatsoever. My point is, as long as there is a position for huge numbers of this population, and by huge numbers, I just mean 1% of the population, which is still 3 million people. Huge numbers of the population can understand what is going on, that you and I can sit here and discuss their machinations and tactics. Their biggest issue isn't that they're evil. It's that people are understanding that they're evil. Because if I'm an evil person and I'm just sitting here and I just want to have dinner with you, and you're like, "I'm not having dinner with you, you're evil," that is an unsolvable problem for them. Because the whole pretense, as you talk about constantly, is that they're the good guys, or they're looking out for you, or this other team are the bad guys, so therefore by definition we're the good guys. Once there's an understanding of this collusion and that there's nothing you could put past these people, which was understood in later years in the USSR, starting with Khrushchev's, not even later years, when Khrushchev's secret speech, and he denounced Stalin and said, "Look, we've been torturing these people and all this other horrible stuff." If there's any space for humans, Americans, to have a discussion about what the nature of what is going on, for me at least, I don't see how you can't see that as not being optimistic, but being hopeful.
So in order, I'm going to butcher some smart person's quote, but in order to, the first thing necessary to be able to get out of a prison is you have to know you're in one.
Yes.
So the
correct.
people in Soviet Russia, they knew they were in a prison. The people in the United States do not know that.
Well, they didn't all know in the Soviet Russia, to be honest, because there's actually a very disturbing anecdote, which, there's a disturbing one. I'll tell the nice version, which was Boris Yeltsin, who was like high up in like the Moscow city government. He came here to visit NASA in Houston at the time. And then just as a side trip, he went to a supermarket, and the supermarket is still there. And there's photos of him at the supermarket. And he's looking around, And he's not being surrounded by like party dignitaries. He's surrounded by like school teachers and, regular blue collar folk. And he had never seen that much food in his life. And he's like, and on the plane back to Russia, via Miami, he's sitting there with his head in his hands. And he's like, they had to lie to us. They had to lie because once people saw what it was like, they'd realize the whole thing's bullshit. So I don't think there was, even if there's an understanding that we're in a prison, you don't really understand what it's like on the other side of the prison. And you don't understand just how pervasive and deep those bars go. And I think Americans are starting to understand, wait a minute, this, like you say, it's not like, oh, Hunter Biden just got a kickback or Donald Trump's a jerk on Twitter. This is so endemic and so systemic that it doesn't matter if you switch Biden for Trump or Kamala Harris or Jeb Bush. It's going to be just musical chairs with these people.
So so this book, it's the horrors of what happened. How do you blame it on communism? I don't blame it on communism. I blame it on the people who instituted communism, because I'm sitting here in capitalism and they're just as authoritarian as the goddamn, or they want to be, and they're getting close.
They want to be. And
they're getting close. I mean,
I don't think they are getting close.
Well, we don't have health care. We don't have a living wage. We have homeless people under every bridge. And you go bankrupt if you get sick, and you go bankrupt if you try to get educated, and they can send $100 billion right in your face to the most corrupt country in the world, while they won't send $100 billion to America right in your face, and people see it. So how much, they have universal health care in Russia now. We still don't have it in the United States. We're ruled by psychopathic murderers.
I'm not arguing with you that we're ruled by psychopathic murderers. I'm an anarchist. But if you think that things can't get worse in this country, I'm going to have to very respectfully disagree. And one of the reasons I wrote this book is I think Americans are very naive about the nature of evil. Americans think is someone who's evil is someone with a mustache who's yelling and banging the table. Whereas more often than not, it's just some bureaucrat who doesn't like the way you look at him, who's not going to give you medicine for this reason or that, and is just getting off on that little power trip. And as a result of this, children, men, women were starved, sent to concentration camps, vanished overnight. And I think we got a ways to go before we get to that point in this country.
But you don't blame communism, or
well,
do you?
I blame. I don't know. The ideology in and of itself can't implement itself. It's the people who implemented it.
But do you think the ideology naturally leads to what happened? Because because they were told they're supposed to be lefties. They're supposed to be for free speech. They're not supposed to be for censorship and everything. And then when they were implementing it, they were told this is just temporary to get rid of these people who are on.
You're spoiling my book.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No. So Emma Goldman, who was an anarchist, who got deported by Wilson to the Soviet Union, her and her partner Alexander Berkman. Berkman said, "I wanted to kiss the ground when I landed in Soviet Russia." He was so excited. And she sits, and then they start rounding up anarchists. They start rounding up Mensheviks. They start rounding up the social revolutionists. And Emma Goldman sits down with Lenin, and she goes, "What the hell? What the hell? Like we're communists. We're socialists. We're supposed to be for free speech." And he says, "Free speech is a bourgeois contrivance. And you can't have that during wartime. When this Russian Civil War is over, then we can have a talk about it." And the second the Russian Civil War ends with the victory of the Reds over the Whites, they start rounding up people the likes you have never seen. Anyone who wasn't a Bolshevik got vanished with their families. And she went west. She and Alexander Berkman escaped what became the Soviet Union, and were like, "Guys, I'm for the workers. I'm for violence. But this is violence being used against the workers in a way that the Tsar never even imagined." What they would do is they would arrest someone. She recounted this story. They'd arrest someone who had a wealthy relative. They go to the relative. They go, "Hey, your nephew got arrested, but maybe you can make it nice and we'll free him." And the wealthy relative hands over the money. Then they arrest the relative for bribery. So they have the money, and then the two people go sent to God knows how long. So she's like, but the thing is, when she went to England and was discussing this stuff, when she started her speech, standing ovation. When she finished, you could hear a pin drop because they didn't want to hear it, because this was the great experiment. I've been to the future and it works. And they didn't want to believe that what Lenin and later Stalin was implementing was against the working class, which they supposedly valorized.
So that's just them, that right? That's Lenin and Stalin doing that. That's not the communist ideology. The communist ideology is the opposite of that, right?
Well, there were two schools, and there's the Marxist school and the Bakunin school. I very much more the Bakunin school. In 1867, this is the Anarchist Handbook, Bakunin dressed down Marx, and he predicted exactly what the USSR would look like. And his ideology can be summed up in this criticism in one sentence: when the people are beaten by a stick, they aren't much happier if it's called the people stick. And his point is, if you're going to have this gigantic government which controls every aspect of every person's life, there's no way it's not going to become depraved and dictatorial. And I think history bore him out.
And so what, I'm not for, what the problems with capitalism, right? So the problem with capitalism is that a capitalist, when he decides, could cut the legs out underneath economically of an entire town and take his capital into somewhere else. And then what did that town, that which has happened over and over and over and over in the United States, which is the outsourcing of all our jobs, offshoring. In fact, to the point where our government's so corrupt, we gave a tax break if you take a job and send it out of the country. That's how corrupt our country is. People don't realize that. What was the point of me saying all this?
Well, I'm just going to agree with what you're saying, because if you have corporations writing the laws, they're going to make sure that all the breaks are in their favor and opposed to things that would allow competition to take the leg out from under them. And why wouldn't they? They would sit down. Here's a good example. If the airlines, right, were just going badly because they were refusing to go for whatever reason, it would just take them 2 seconds to call up Mitch McConnell or Kevin McCarthy and say, hey, we're doing badly, and they get a bailout.
That's right.
So we all have to suffer the risks, whereas they get all the profits, because it's just one phone call away and they get bailed out. And every single industry, one after another, there's a lot of talk about, there's going to be this college bust and all these university loans and whatever that. And everyone's already talking about, we're going to have to bail them out. Why? Why are we always bailing out the wealthy?
Corruption. That's what that would be.
Right. But I mean, it's ridiculous to me.
I mean, that's what the CARES Act was. CARES Act was $5 trillion in pure corruption. So, Michael, what are the big criticisms that people have of you that you'd like to push back against?
Oh, no, I don't like pushing back because it's a lot of I love it when I get criticism, don't you? Billy Idol has that line about, I like it when people insult me because then I stop pretending to be nice.
I don't remember that line. That's good. Well, I stopped pretending to be nice way before that. But but all right. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show, and everybody should check out your podcast. Everybody should check out this book. It's The White Pill by Michael Malice, and it's a tale of good and evil. Also, all of his other books, Dear Reader, The Unauthorized Autobiography of Kim Jong-il, and The New Right, A Journey to the Fringe of American Politics. And how did you become, how did Harvey Picard get to, how did that happen?
He finally met a Jew who was more obnoxious than him. No, I met him because I was doing a screenplay about this band from the 80s that never got produced, and the keyboard player did the animation for the movie. And Ted Hope, who was the producer, sent an email that said, Harvey's in town with nothing to do. If you want to hang out with him, this is your chance. And no one took him up on it except for me. And we hit it off really great. And it was one of the most wonderful, rewarding relationships of my life. He's just a great, great man. He was a great mentor to me. I miss him very much. And if people who don't know who he is, please check out the American Splendor comics. It's just really an amazing dude, a real mensch.
Yeah, I saw the movie, Judah Friedlander. That was a great movie. That was a great movie. It really was. Well, thank you again for coming on the show. I hope to see you again. So, by the way, before I let you go, what is your take on Ukraine? You know what mine is. What's your take?
I am completely uninformed about what's going on, and my only concern is for the peace and safety for both the Russian and the Ukrainian people. And I'm very worried. My expertise is Korea, right? I'm very worried that it becomes another Korean War, where you have on the north Russia and China, and the south you have the U.S. and the UN, and the Korean people are devastated and their country reduced to rubble. Yeah. That's my concern about what's going to happen.
That is happening. It's being reduced to rubble.
Yes.
They're being used as a proxy war. And people think that we're fighting this war because we care about the people of Ukraine. And the reason why we're fighting this war is for American hegemony, NATO supremacy, and to sell more liquefied natural gas. That's why we blew up a gas pipeline. This is because we fear the economic dominance of Russia and their natural resources and labor coming together with Germany and their technology and their capital. And primordially, right?
Yeah.
This was explained on our show the other day. And that's what this, if the United States is the world's terrorists, and if we're in a country, it's because we're trying to steal their natural resources, or where they're at the behest of Saudi Arabia or Israel. So that would be it. Okay, Michael, that's my take on Ukraine.
Great pleasure, Jimmy. Look forward to speaking soon.
Okay, thanks for coming on. Talk to you soon, buddy. I'll give you a call when the next time I'm in Austin.
Please do.
Hey, we're doing live stand-up comedy in Los Angeles, Tempe, Arizona, Palm Springs, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, Nashville, Northampton, Massachusetts, and a lot more places. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets and become a premium member while you're there. You get access to all of our stuff. See you then.